Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel. I have read amazing books this last week, so I'm excited to talk about them. But before we jump into that, I thought I'd give you another knitting update. I finished refinishing the table. I'm going to refinish the coffee table to match, but I did have a little more time to get to work on my knitting, so let me get that. Now, with this dress, I still have no idea if it's gonna fit me or if it's going to be for my daughter. I figure after it gets to a certain length, I will put it on a piece of thread, try it on me, then if it doesn't fit, try it on my daughter, and if that doesn't fit, try it on my younger daughter. So we'll see what happens.
And yes, I was deluding myself. It is definitely going to be for one of my daughters.
But what I've gotten to so far is this far. It's about, t-shirt length at this point. I don't know if you can kind of tell, but it's getting somewhere. It is very boring, just a stockinette stitch, and we will see what happens with it. I did have someone recommend that I should say, this much of the knitting is this audiobook, and I realized I knit in too many random situations to be very accurate with any of that. I knit when I watch YouTube. I knit when I am in the car. I'll knit at different times. But I did see how much it takes me. So I listened to an audiobook for an hour and knit from about here to here. So that much is an hour of work. Now, jumping into the books, the first book that I wanted to talk about, I picked up The Cost of Free Land, Jews, Lakota, and an American Inheritance by Rebecca Claren. And I wasn't quite sure what I was getting into picking this up, but I am so glad I picked it up. This is an excellent read. This is the author's personal story of talking about the history of Native peoples in South Dakota, as well as the history of Jewish people, not only the story of the Jewish people as a whole, but also the story of Jewish settlers who moved to South Dakota and how her family, personally, how she has benefited from the land that was taken from Native peoples in South Dakota. And I thought that it was very interesting to see the similarities between the two peoples and some of the maybe hypocrisy of taking Native peoples' lands when you have had to deal with some of those same issues yourself. I really thought that not only did it show those issues very well, but it made it so personal. It was about her family. It was looking into her history and how to come to grips with that and what to do about that. And I thought that that was excellent. So I really thought it was a well done book. I really liked how not only did she talk about the history, but she talked about what she is doing to make it better, how she and her family are trying to make their own reparations for these things that have happened in the past, as well as what you personally can do. And I thought that that was really great because it has a call to action, which I think is very essential. And also I really loved the discussion of what makes things right. What is an apology? What do you do to fix things when someone has been wronged? And I thought that that was all really excellent. It just was a fantastic book. So I am so glad I picked this up. Highly recommend to everyone, especially if you live in the United States, to understand where the land that you are living on has come from and the history behind it and what that means for your life now. And I thought that that was just excellent. Highly recommend. This was a 5-star read. I'm so glad I picked it up. Now, Audrey Approved recommended the book The Forger's Spell, a true story of Vermeer Nazis and the greatest art hoax of the 20th century by Edward Dolnick. This was also a 5-star nonfiction read, so interesting. It is going into the history of these falsified Vermeer paintings, like it says in the title, right? And it is talking about the process of forgeries and some of the history behind forgeries. And it's talking about this specific case of these forged Vermeers and how they came to be, and also how they just weren't good. It was so shocking that so many people fell for this when you can look at them as a novice and say, that's not a great painting. And I think that it's so interesting to see that kind of group mentality of everybody else is saying it's great, so I'm gonna say it's great too. It's the emperor's new clothes. Everyone says, yes, it is beautiful. We all think it's beautiful. We're all gonna buy into this same idea. I thought that was super interesting. I did see some reviews on Goodreads that were saying, oh, it went into the details of how to forge art and that just got so boring. And I'm like, that was what I was here for. That was so cool. I thought it was really interesting, all the processes of learning how to bake the paints at certain temperatures and mix in different things to try to imitate old paintings and how they got away with it and how people still get away with these things. I also loved the discussion of who is easiest to fool, and it really made me think about things that the author talked about, how it is much easier to fool experts than it is to fool a novice. The author explains if you talk to a magician, it is so much easier to fool a group of scientists than it is to fool a group of babies, because the babies, they don't realize that what you're doing is against the laws of nature, where scientists are going to look at it and say, that can't happen, how? Those preconceived notions and those preconceived biases from our expertise is what makes it so easy to fool us. And I thought that that was really an interesting take. I thought this book was just fascinating. Highly recommend. 5 stars. Great book. On the advice of Erin at Erin Read a Book, I picked up Catherine the Great, Portrait of a Woman by Robert K. Massey. And this is a monster of a book. This is a long book. I started this book in ebook and it was taking me ages, and I had some other books come off of hold from the library, so they took precedent, and I didn't think that I was ever going to get through this book. And then it came available on audiobook, so halfway through I switched to audio, which I'm glad I did, just because this book is a long one. We are not going to miss any detail when it comes to Catherine the Great. And this was very informative. I feel like I am missing a huge chunk of European history, not understanding everything that was going on in this. So I really liked this because it helped me kind of understand a little bit of the politics of the time period and a big picture of it. Now, Catherine the Great was a very interesting figure, and I think the book did a great job at really giving you a lot of information about her whole life. The part that I didn't love is about the second half of the book. It started dividing it into sections, and instead of being chronological like it had been up until that point, it switched around to devote its time into chunks of things. So this is everything about her devotion to art. Okay, this is about the wars, and then we go through that. And it almost made me feel like I was missing by the end. I think if it had stuck with a chronological portrayal of Catherine's life, I would have felt a little more emotionally connected to Catherine by the end of her life. Instead, I was a little all over the place because it kind of was jumping a little too much. So that was a bit of a downfall. But the reason it was grouped that way is there was just so much information that the author wanted to share. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Do I think that this book could have been shorter and if they had stuck to a more concise timeline? Probably. But it was still very fascinating, very interesting to learn all about her. It was maybe a little bit, you could tell that the author thinks that Catherine the Great is pretty great. I think there were a lot of things in Catherine's life that could have been looked at with a much more critical eye than the author was using. I think a lot of it was explained away. She was given a lot of excuses. And it's not to say that the other side wasn't shown. Yes, the author talks about how lots of people think that she killed her husband, and this is why. But the author also tells us, but this is why they're all wrong. She could never have done that, right? And I think that there was a little bit of that just thinking that what she did was great, and talking about her lovers, and they were all such younger men than her. The author makes sure to qualify it. It wasn't just a physical relationship. She just needed companionship. That was something she just really needed. So, it makes sense that she needed all these young lovers. And I'm like, are we really just excusing this? Yeah, I know that there are lots of men who have done the same thing and worse, but it doesn't make this better. Those are my two complaints. I don't want you to think this wasn't an excellent book. I highly recommend it. I think it was very good. And if you want to understand anything about this time period or anything about Catherine the Great, yeah, pick this up. It will give you all the information, and it's fascinating. But those are my two little gripes with it, is just the way things were divided out towards the end of the book, and that the author definitely loves Catherine the Great, and maybe to the detriment of some of the storytelling. But overall, really great book. So glad I finished this, and I'm proud of myself for finishing it because it was so long, and I had to switch to audio halfway through. So still excellent book. And to finish off the video, I did pick up another David Sedaris book because of course I did. I was on a roll. So I was going through the library thinking, is there any other collections of David Sedaris books that I have not read? And I think this is the 11th book by David Sedaris that I picked up. And I got Dress Your Family in Corduroy and Denim. And was this a great time? Yes, it was. Were there very many unique stories that I had not heard from other collections? No, I think I've covered almost all of them, which is too bad. But do I regret ever going back to another David Sedaris book? No, I have a good time, and I needed it after all these more involved nonfiction books this past week or so. And that is what I read the last week or so. If you have thoughts on these books, let me know in the comments down below, or just let me know your favorite nonfiction book. I always love a good nonfiction, so I need to add more to my list. I am relieved to have finally put a few more 5-star books on my list for the year. I really enjoyed some of these, so make sure to check them out and let me know what you think, and I will see you all on the next one.